The Scottish Parliament election is fast approaching. The nation's future is at stake. Tonight, all 6 party leaders are here to vie for your votes.
And I'll be here in the spin room to bring you some expert analysis.
Stay tuned for one of the big moments of this campaign. Good evening and welcome to the STV Leaders Debate from the splendid Signet Library in Edinburgh's Parliament Square. We join you live on STV, the STV Player and YouTube. We also welcome viewers from ITV Border, and you can join in the debate on social media using the hashtag STV Debate. Tonight's format is straightforward. I'll be questioning the party leaders together before all of them get to cross-examine each other. Debating tonight, we have the Scottish Liberal Democrat leader Alex Cole-Hamilton, the Reform UK Scotland leader Malcolm Offord, the Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar, co-leader of the Scottish Greens Ross Greer, SNP leader John Swinney, and the Scottish Conservative leader Russell Findlay. And before we get going, let's cross to the spin room and join Rona and her guests.
You join me in the lower library, which is just as grand as the one upstairs. Lots of journalists and political advisors here looking forward to the big event. Joining us now for some pre-match analysis, STV's Westminster correspondent Lucy Dunn and ITV Border's political editor Kieran Andrews. So, it's a big event. What can we expect?
Well, I think with so many voters still undecided and actually a number of people uninterested in this election, tonight is a real opportunity for politicians to show people why they should go out and vote next week. So I'll be very interested to hear what the last few remarks from every single leader is going to be like.
Yeah, because lots of people have complained that it's a bit boring, this election, this campaign, so hopefully we'll have some fireworks tonight.
Well, I mean, frankly, it has been a little bit boring, but it's also been quite bitter. And that's the other thing, the cross-examination tonight, when you've got leaders like John Swinney and Anas Sarwar have been at each other's throats, and Anas Sarwar and Malcolm Offord from Reform in particular, fireworks could fly.
Yeah, this cross-examination format is brilliant, isn't it? Because it really shows up people's weaknesses and gives the leaders a chance to land a blow.
Absolutely, and as Kieran said, we have already seen Labour and Reform come up against each other. Will we see more of that tonight? Will we see the SNP throwing punches as well? I mean, it'd be quite interesting, I think, to see exactly how the leaders decide to show voters and viewers, I suppose, just as we are approaching the election next week now, why they do need to turn out.
Yeah, this is their chance to make a big impression because, as Lucy says, we're going to the polls in just over a week's time.
Well, this is the last chance to make a big impression in a setting like this. And as Lucy says, what will be crucial is how they approach that. Will the candidates try and be adversarial? Will they try and be first ministerial and kind of take the higher ground? I suspect probably not, but that will be a really interesting function of this debate.
Absolutely. Lucy, Kieran, thanks for that. More from you later. Right, let's get the show on the road. Back to you, Colin.
It's time now for opening statements. You each have 30 seconds to make your pitch to viewers. Up first is Reform UK's Malcolm Offord.
I'm a passionate Scot, born and bred in Greenock, and I want Scotland to be successful again. We used to lead the world, and we can do so again, because we're the most creative people ever invented. Together, we can build a new Scotland, which makes our workers better off, ensures good jobs for our youngsters, and looks after our elderly and vulnerable. This election is an exciting opportunity for you to remove the SNP after 20 years of failure and decline. Together, we can unleash Scotland's potential for the benefit of every Scot.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Scotland has got so much going for it, but right now it feels like things just aren't working. Scottish Liberal Democrats will help you with the cost of living, deliver first-rate healthcare, fix the roads and the ferries, and get our schools back to their best. In seats along the West Coast, across the Highlands, East Dunbartonshire, Edinburgh and Fife, we can win against the SNP. But wherever you are, you can elect a Lib Dem on your second peach-coloured regional ballot who will deliver change with fairness at its heart.
Ross Greer.
Together, we can demand better for Scotland. The Greens have already delivered the things saving you money, like free bus travel for young people and the scrapping of peak rail fares. Now we want to go even further. universal free bus travel like they have in other countries like Malta and Luxembourg, childcare that is affordable and flexible, that meets your family's needs, especially for under fives. And we know that we can make the super rich pay to deliver the public services that everyone else deserves. Let's demand better for Scotland. You can help build a fairer, greener, kinder nation by voting for the Scottish Greens on your peach-coloured regional ballot paper.
And that's Sarwar.
Tonight I'll set out how, as First Minister, I will fix our NHS, make life more affordable and give all our children the chance to succeed. I get that you're scunnered with politics, but it doesn't have to be like this. In a week's time, we have a real chance to change the government in Scotland for the first time in 20 years, but only if you vote for it. So to reject the poison of reform, to beat the SNP and to change Scotland, vote Scottish Labour on May the 7th.
Russell Findlay.
I love Scotland and I despair at the damage being inflicted by the SNP. Scots are told to accept broken public services and forced to pay sky-high taxes. And that's because the SNP's only interest is independence. John Swinney says that he'll win a majority next week and hold a referendum in 2028. Let's prove him wrong. You can stop an SNP majority by voting Scottish Conservative on your peach ballot paper.
And John Swinney.
The SNP's pledge is always to be on Scotland's side. When times are tough, that matters even more. Our plans have the people of Scotland at their heart. Childcare expansion, GP walk-in centres, help with rising costs, including a £2 cap on bus journeys and lower food prices, help for young Scots to buy a home, and Scotland's energy finally used to bring down our bills. Both votes for the SNP on the 7th of May delivers an SNP majority and a referendum to put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands.
OK, let's get into the debate. The top issues for voters throughout this campaign, according to the opinion polls, are the NHS and the cost of living. So let's start with the NHS. Do any of you have a big idea to solve the problems that everyone is facing in health and care services? Anyone?
Frontline first.
Yeah.
More GPs, more money into the front line, into GPs, into nurses, into doctors, not wasting money on huge tracts of middle management.
Colin, on any given night, there are 2,000 Scots stuck in hospital well enough to go home, but too frail to do so without a care package to receive them to their own home or to their community care home. That reality is leading to cancelled operations. It's costing £1.2 million a day. It's the reason ambulances stop outside A&E. It's why we want to spend £400 million to invest in social care, to make it a profession of choice and end that care bottleneck.
An absolutely constant focus on reducing waiting times and waiting lists, and we've just seen today a 75% reduction in long waits, a 54% reduction for inpatients. The action that I promised the people of Scotland I would deliver as First Minister is now happening, and I want to complete the job.
Malcolm Offord.
We believe that we can make our wonderful medics, doctors and nurses more productive if we help them with their tax bills. They're paying too much tax, they're being dragged into higher tax levels, they're managing their workflow, and we know as a result they've got theatres lying empty where we don't have our medics in the theatre. So let's simplify tax to incentivise them to help them be more productive.
Right now, on John Swinney and the SNP's watch, there are almost 800,000 waits in the NHS, and we know people are being forced to pay £12,000 for a hip replacement, £8,000 for a knee replacement and £5,000 with a cataract. That's why, as First Minister, I will fix the mess. I will cut waiting lists. I will make sure people are able to access the care they need when they need it, even if that means buying up capacity in the private sector. I'll end the ATM rush for a GP appointment. I'll bring back the family doctor, and we'll finally embrace technology so we can get faster treatment and faster diagnosis rather than an analogue government.
Our health service needs huge change, but there are simple changes we could make. If we had more mental health nurses in our GP clinics, for example, that would mean people could see the specialists they need in their own community, and it would take pressure off of GPs. If we allowed pharmacists to do more of what they're qualified to do but what the rules currently prevent them from doing, that would also take a huge amount of pressure off of our GPs and allow more people who need a GP appointment to actually see them. There are simple fixes that we could deliver right now before we deliver the major change that our healthcare system clearly needs.
Did you all miss the bit where I said a big idea? I'm talking about something maybe new.
Well, the steps that we're taking, for example, are to roll out GP walk-in centres. They're already starting to open their around Scotland. They're seeing patients and they're taking some of the heat off GP practices around the country.
Not GPs,
We're reducing, they're reducing the burden on GPs.
Russell Findlay says there's not enough GPs to staff them.
Well, there's a rising number of GPs and we're expanding the GP walk-in centres. And crucially, Colin, all of my opponents are wanting to oppose the GP walk-in centres and the one that's delivering the GP walk-in centres to make sure that more patients can be treated more quickly, and that's only going to come about with SNP government.
We would support these walk-in centres if we thought they were going to work, but doctors' organisations have said that's not what they need. One fellow had to wait. He had to wait 6 hours.
What are you going to do? Well, but you've opposed the GP walk-in centres.
And the Royal College have said, which is they need investment in surgeries. We would situate 900 clinical specialists, either physiotherapists or mental health professionals. Remember, 1/3 of all GP appointments are made because of an underlying mental health problem. This country has a mental health crisis.
John should have a record that embarrasses him rather than him trying to jump into other people's answers. The reality is we currently have a two-tier National Health Service. The big idea I have is to return the National Health Service to its actual founding principles, free and available where they need it, not people forced to pay under John Swinney and the
That's what's happening today.
That's
exactly what's being delivered today.
Tell that to the granny paying £12,000 for her hip replacement.
We've got record hip and knee operations being done in Scotland, a rising number of operations, and we've got falling waiting times and waiting lists.
John,
as I promised people in Scotland, I would deliver as First Minister, and that's exactly what I'm delivering.
To address your question, today we launched an elderly healthcare plan that would buy capacity to ensure that elderly people in particular, raiding their life savings, borrowing money from their relatives to get knee and hip operations, waiting years in agony under this SNP government, we would buy capacity to allow them to get those operations done
from the private sector.
Absolutely.
You asked for a big idea, Colin. The big idea is to make sure that people can stay healthy rather than to just treat them once they've become ill. That's why the Greens would put more money into prevention in the first place. We know that so many of the health issues that people face are a result of poverty. There is a result of poor quality housing. For example, landlords should not be able to collect rent if the housing is of such poor quality, if there's mould, for example, that means the tenants are becoming ill. That's the kind of action the Greens have pushed for. We should be helping people to stay healthy in the first place. Some people are inevitably going to become ill. Of course they are. That's why it's important to have capacity for them in our hospitals. The big idea needs to be in prevention, because we've poured more money into treatment. We know that that's not where the solution is.
But also we need to deal with it now, Malcolm Offord.
I mean, fundamentally, the NHS needs a fresh pair of eyes. It's been run now for 19 years by the same party, with the SNP, and they are all out of ideas. And why wouldn't you be after 19 years to be all out of ideas?
I asked you for big ideas.
Yes, and absolutely. And the first thing we will do is bring the medics and practitioners together, because if you want to fix a problem, speak to people inside the NHS.
You don't have any ideas.
And there's a 20 billion budget, and that's a big budget. It's about reallocation of resources.
There'd be less for your tax cuts.
And you do that in conjunction with the medics.
No one has mentioned
NHS.
care services.
I have.
We have a big problem with bed blocking, but no one's given us that idea. Your idea was to turn hotels into care homes.
We could absolutely do that. We need to move people from being in beds at £600 a night to being in beds at £300 a night, £200 a night. We'll save a lot of money doing that, and there's accommodation we can to transfer to that relatively quickly, and that's something we should make a priority.
Let me bring in Alex.
I did mention care services, Colin, because it's absolutely at the heart of this. At the start of this campaign,
Malcolm Offord's given us an idea.
I went to visit Margaret McGill in the North Highlands, who'd been in hospital
and you have said
before.
so much about Margaret McGill during this election.
And rightly
What's your new idea for dealing with this?
£400 million invested in the first 3 years of this Parliament. £400 million invested in the first year of this Parliament to make social care a profession of choice, where necessary, reserving key worker housing for them so that they've got somewhere to live in the far north of Scotland, where house prices are just pricing out the market.
Well, I'm the only person on this debate stage who's actually worked in our NHS. I was an NHS dentist before continuing my public service in politics, and the NHS is in my DNA. But the truth is that you're right, it's not had the right focus, whether it is cuts to primary care budgets, whether it is cuts to social care packages right across this country. That's why we need to invest in the step-down beds, so we don't have delayed discharge, the troubles at the exit door of our hospitals. It means properly funding local government rather than the austerity we've seen from John Swinney and the SNP impose on local government. But that all only happens if we remove the SNP from office and take a different direction.
And as you've never argued for more money for local government.
Let John Swinney respond to that.
Yes, I have.
So what we've...
Hang on a sec, let John Swinney in.
What we've actually delivered is a real terms increase in health budgets and in local government budgets to make sure that social care can be effectively funded. Now, Malcolm Offord's idea about providing extra care capacity has one big flaw in it. There aren't enough people to deliver those services because of the impact of Brexit in reducing the working age population in Scotland. And it's Malcolm Offord and Reform that are responsible for the absolute folly, along with Russell Findlay and the Conservatives, of Brexit, which has done so much damage to the social care workforce in Scotland.
Well, I'm coming on to the cost of living now. Are you being honest with voters about your plans to tackle the cost of living? The biggest idea has probably been your supermarket price cap. Can you deliver that? Is that being honest with the voters?
Yes, because we have public health powers, and if people can't afford a nutritious shop, then they are unable to maintain their public health.
He says, why haven't you done this before?
Well, because we're dealing with an acute public health crisis that is coming our way because of the pressures that are coming on the international stage. So what we can do is use our public health powers to require supermarkets...
But the cost of living crisis has been going on for quite some time now, so why haven't you done it before?
Well, we've actually expanded the early learning childcare, we've improved access to bus services, we've introduced peak rail fare, we've abolished peak rail fares, we've made sure there's no increase in rail fares. These are all some of the measures that we've taken practically to deliver support to people who are struggling with the cost of living.
Free bus travel for young people and removal of peak rail fares were proposed by the Greens and secured by the Greens. Very proud to work with the SNP to deliver it. But it was the Greens who brought those ideas to the table. That's why at this election we're proposing universal free bus travel. Just under half of the population in Scotland can already travel on the bus for free. It was the Greens who delivered it for young people, on top of that for over 60s and disabled people. In other countries, everyone can travel on the bus for free. That's the kind of big ideas people need to help them through the cost of living crisis. And critically, it has to be on a network of publicly owned buses.
Colin, the reality is what John Swinney is proposing is a gimmick, not real action, because people need their bills to come down now, not a promise years down the line and lots of legal challenges. So I would convene the supermarkets immediately so we can drive down the prices.
But he wants to compel them, you want to convene them.
Well, he will take 3 years at least to pass that legislation and go through the legal challenges.
Would you back that legislation if it came to the Scottish Parliament?
I want the action right now.
Would you back that legislation if it came to the Scottish Parliament?
But I want to be running a government that acts right now.
Would you back that legislation if it came to the Scottish Parliament?
I will be leading the government is my ambition, not to back the government. But let me just get into the actual package. Let me get to the actual package.
Anas is just covering up the fact. Anas is just covering up the fact that he wants to oppose what we're trying to do.
No, not at all.
He wants to stop us in all of this agenda because he's part of the Stop the SNP.
On the actual package, right now, John Swinney wants the people in Scotland to pay the price of the illegal actions of Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. I would have a cost of living emergency package right now.
John Swinney's standing there with a straight face saying that he's going to legislate to fix supermarket prices. He knows it's completely unrealistic. It's dishonest.
No, it's not.
It's a PR stunt for an election. And in every country around the world where governments have attempted to meddle in the free market, what happens? Prices don't go down, John. They only go up.
Well, what happens is that governments...
And that's what you would do if you ever got your way. But you know you're not going to do it.
Governments take action to protect people in their society. And that's exactly what my government does. We intervene to protect people, particularly where they're facing the pressures of the cost of living. We act, we deliver, we reduce we reduce the bus fares. We're going to do more in that respect. We'll act on food prices. We're the ones that will act. And the Conservative Party is obviously stopping us doing that.
Malcolm Offord.
So Reform is the only party in this debate talking about giving people their money back. Scots workers who go to work every day are paying too much tax, they're over-regulated and they need a break. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to give them that break. We're going to bring the 6 tax bands, which are ridiculously complicated, back to 3 in the rest of the UK, and then make it 1p below for each worker. And that is going to immediately put money back into the hands of
being honest with the voters, which goes back to my original question, is that being honest with the voters? Because we have economic experts who say that's not. It's fantasy.
It's a £2 billion a saving out of a £72 billion budget is only 3%. It's perfectly achievable.
But you've not said how you would achieve it.
I have said how I would achieve it.
There's no details.
I have. Do you want me to explain?
The Institute for Physical Studies described it as a mirage.
Explain it very briefly, in simple terms that I could understand.
Okay, and within the £72 billion budget, the SNP spent £5 billion on net zero nonsense. So we'll get $2 billion from that.
So now we're just denying science.
And
not even going to try and tackle the climate crisis.
And they spend £6.5 billion on 132 quangos. We can get $1 billion from that. That's $3 billion, but we only need 2.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Colin, people deserve better than this, and we get these platitudes from the SNP.
Give them better than this.
I will do.
That's what they want from you, from all of you.
I met a dentist in Fife who was complaining about the fact that John Swinney or Nicola Sturgeon promised at the last election to abolish all dental charges. It didn't happen. So talk is cheap. People want to see what you're really going to do. This is what we'll really do. This is a cost of living election. It's going to get much, much worse when the fuel price cap lifts in July. It's already hard if you're on fuel oil, whether you're in the Highlands, in the far north, in the Northern Isles, you haven't got a price cap. You're not being protected. Lib Dems want an emergency £100 million programme of works to insulate the coldest Scottish homes in the country so they're ready for the winter.
1 in 5 children in Scotland are growing up in poverty. There's a legally binding target of cutting child poverty, the child poverty rate to 10% by 2031. Can any of you meet that?
Yes.
Yes.
And we will meet it. And we'll meet it.
And we
Let
set
him
out,
go first.
already, because of actions of the SNP government, child poverty is 9% lower than it is in the rest of the UK. So we're making that progress. And just before Parliament rose for the election, we set out a whole range of different investments to build whole family support to make sure that we succeed in our objectives in child poverty. It's my defining mission in government.
Colin, I support the welfare state, but the reality is, under John Swinney and the SNP, they think the answer to every problem is either to create a new benefit or a new quango. What we need to do is challenge structural poverty. That means giving young people the classroom assistants and the teachers they need for literacy and numeracy catch-up. It means maintaining free university tuition, protecting our colleges and 9,000 new apprenticeships and well-paid jobs. That's
briefly, I said briefly.
We support the safety net of social security, but social security spending, benefit spending under the SNP is out of control. We're the only party being honest about that.
Your policies would increase child poverty.
No, the best way to lift families...
You put a two-child cap on, you increase child poverty.
The best way to lift families out of poverty is through well-paid jobs, by improving education, improving training.
The Conservatives have created this child poverty. 14 years of austerity has delivered the child poverty challenge we've got in Scotland today.
What about the 10,000 homeless children?
Alex Cole-Hamilton is speaking.
Colin, I'm in politics because of my time as a youth worker working alongside child poverty. And at this election, Lib Dems want to focus particularly on those families who are unpaid carers, where children are most at risk of poverty. We want to give them £400 extra every year in their unpaid carer benefit.
OK, Ross, very briefly.
When the school started last August, there were 8,000 more children getting free school meals because of the Scottish Greens. We would keep going and deliver that, but the critical thing is most children in poverty in this country are in working households. We need to boost wages. Government can do that by making it a condition of getting a government contract that a business boosts the wages of its lowest paid staff.
Briefly, Malcolm.
Bottom line is we have to grow the economy. The Scottish economy is flatlining. We need to grow it, and that will be the benefit of everybody who works, and that will also provide
to grow children out of poverty.
And it will also provide a lot of benefits and welfare for
those kids are struggling now.
No, hang on. That's all we've got time for. It's time now for a short break. Stay tuned, because when we come back, we'll kick off the cross-examination. You won't want to miss that. Welcome back to the STV Leaders Debate. Let's get right into the first of 6 rounds of cross-examination. Please speak one at a time. And I know me telling you not to interrupt is a bit rich, but do as I say, not as I do. And I'll intervene if I have to. First to face questions is the Scottish leader of Reform UK, Malcolm Offord. The other politicians will each have 2 minutes, and these time limits will be robustly enforced. Russell Findlay, can you start the questioning, please?
Thank you, Colin. Lord Offord, you've admitted that at least 3 of your Reform UK candidates support Scottish independence. Can you name them for the voters at home?
They do not support Scottish independence. They are previous independent supporters, and in fact 2 of them are previous members of the SNP who have decided to give up on that project.
Well, that's not true.
Because it's not of interest to the Scottish people.
There's at least one prominent candidate who's on camera saying, as a candidate in the 2024 general election for Reform, that he still believes in Scottish independence.
Russell, I know this is what you want to talk about because it's your only policy. You want to talk about another referendum. But this is not what the people of Scotland want to talk about. And it's a little bit hypocritical because your candidate, Shettleston, is as a former SNP member.
All our candidates are supporting the union.
As I've said before,
in terms of policy,
we have 3 candidates who are previously supporting independence, who have seen the light, come to join Reform. The clue's in the name. Our party is called Reform UK, Russell, and we support the UK.
Lord Offord, you've said you want to work with nationalists. Nigel Farage has said that he wants to says it would be quite reasonable to hold another referendum. Do you agree with Nigel Farage?
No, he has not said that at all.
He absolutely has.
Well, let me explain what I think we should. Let me explain what I think we need to do here. This Parliament for 25 years has been completely sidetracked by talking about a constitutional question, which is the reserved matter. The people of Scotland want Holyrood to start doing what's in the book on devolved matters, the schools, the roads, the houses.
Nigel Farage
and
that another referendum is reasonable?
That is what Reform UK, when it comes into Holyrood, will focus entirely its time on. We'll not be talking about reserved matters. We'll not be talking about referendum. I know you want to talk about it, Russell. It's your only policy. Good luck with that. The people of Scotland want to know what a positive policy agenda is, and that's what Reform gives them.
Reform UK, all the evidence tells us, are not a unionist party.
OK, we're moving on. It's Alex Cole-Hamilton's turn for 2 minutes.
Lord Offord, 30 years ago, last month, a man walked into Dunblane Primary School and shot dead 16 children and their teacher. It moved a nation to grief and a parliament to action, banning handguns across these islands. But since then, your leader in England, Nigel Farage, has said that banning handguns was, in his words, and I quote, ludicrous and knee-jerk. How do you justify that to the parents of Dunblane? How do you justify that to parents everywhere?
So I don't associate myself with those remarks. I remember very well when that incident happened. It shocked all of us. We were completely stunned by what happened there. And of course, since then, we've tightened up laws, and I wouldn't change those laws at all. I don't know the precise context of that comment, but I can tell you right now, I do not associate with that.
Well, let me give you some more context, because Nigel Farage went on to say he couldn't have been clearer that if you criminalise handguns, then only the criminals will carry guns.
1 minute.
It's clear he wants our country to be more like Trump's America. Like Trump's America. Have you told Nigel Farage that he is wrong about handguns?
We're clear that in this country we don't have a tradition of guns. We don't want to go down a tradition
Your
of
leader
guns
wants
the way
them
America.
back.
No,
It's clear.
there's no question of that. There's no question of that. And we want to maintain the safe society that we have. We do have an issue, we know, with our police force who need to have more capability to deal with disorder, but we do not want to go down the road of guns, licensed guns. We do not want to do that.
Shocked the world, and yet
Absolutely.
your leader, Nigel Farage, couldn't have been clearer. He said that the response was ludicrous. It was knee-jerk. And the worst atrocity committed by a murderer in British history, and that was his response. This is the man you want to put into Downing Street. Can you see how terrible that is?
Can I be clear that I do not associate with these comments, and that was an awful tragedy, and I would not want to see guns licensed anywhere in that manner.
OK, John Swinney.
Lord Offord, you want to cut taxes for the rich. Your party leader, Nigel Farage, wants to privatise Scotland's NHS. You want to deport thousands of highly skilled workers from Scotland. You and your party have poisoned this campaign with racist, intolerant and homophobic views. Will you take the opportunity of this debate to apologise for how you've soured this campaign?
Absolutely not, Mr Swinney. I will not apologise for going on the record and saying honestly what the people of Scotland are concerned about, the real issues. Tax for the rich? No. We want to cut taxes for working people who are being dragged by your government, nurses being dragged into higher tax bands, where when they do extra hours, they then suffer benefits being withdrawn, where their marginal tax rates are 80%. Why on earth would you want to do that?
You're trying to
we
protect
want
rich
to support
people.
workers in Scotland.
Lord Offord, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to protect rich people, and you're trying to use reform as a veneer for what Nigel Farage wants to do, which is to privatise our National Health Service, and the National Health Service should never be up for privatisation.
Can I be very clear? Reform UK is very clear that the NHS will always be free at the point of meat and will be paid for through general taxation. So there is no plan to privatise the NHS. And as far as tax cuts are concerned, I am concerned much more about people who go to work every day, who need a break from your incessant tax rises where you spend more and more people's money and do not give them value for money in return, Mr Swinney.
And then what about the racist, homophobic views and the intolerant views that have poisoned this campaign? Will you apologise for them now?
There is nothing racist in talking about the fact that people in this country, in their communities, are feeling concerned and scared. I am all about community cohesion, Mr Swinney.
But you've been spreading division in communities, and communities are terrified by reform.
I am reflecting back what ordinary, decent
communities are terrified by what you're saying.
Ignored and gaslighted.
People are terrified by
the
what you're saying.
middle-class parties.
OK, and that's Sarwar.
Lord Offord, you were a Tory donor, a Tory advisor, a Tory Lord and a Tory minister. You backed the politics that gave us Brexit, austerity, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. You've called for NHS charges. You've had candidates accused of stealing COVID money. You've had candidates who back Tommy Robinson and called for mass deportations. You yourself have called for Catholic schools to be shut down. So let's just be honest. You aren't new or on the side of working class communities. You're just a Tory in disguise, aren't you?
Anas, I know you don't like the House of Lords. Can I just clarify, by the way, that when you come third and you resign from the Labour Party, you won't
So you don't want to...
You won't take the peerage House of Lords as consolation?
I'm standing to be First
clear,
Minister in this country.
just to be clear,
I'm standing to lead my great country, a country that you question my loyalty to.
Can I
but you
explain
don't want to
where we
deny
are?
the fact that you want to ban Catholic schools
do not-
in this country. You called them denominational schooling you thought needed to come to an end, and you suggested Catholic schools were sectarian. What have you got against so many different communities in this country?
I have been to see senior members of the Catholic Church. I was misrepresented in what I said. I did never call for the abolition of Catholic schools.
But you accept the Tommy Robinson
I did
suggestion,
not
you
call
accept mass
for the abolition of
deportation.
Catholic, and I've cleared that up with the Catholic Church. And as we're the new party, we are disrupting the cosy consensus.
There's nothing
and we are
new
winning the
about
battle
you.
of ideas here. And I understand how you want to misrepresent a lot of what we're saying, but I'm
30
very
seconds.
clear,
Let me ask you a final
I'm very
question.
clear that what we want to do is make Scotland the most successful part of the UK.
Well, you aren't
and we
new.
have the policy agenda to do that.
Well, you aren't new, so let me ask you another question. Nigel Farage has said he wants to cut Scotland's budget. He said he wants to privatise the NHS, and he said he wants to roll back on workers' rights. Whose side are you on? Nigel Farage's side
Last time, quickly.
or Scotland's side?
I'm on the side of people who go to work in Scotland, hard-working, decent Scots, who are
Only some of
overtaxed,
them, right?
over-regulated, and we're going to make
Only some
Scotland
of them, though.
prosperous. We're going to make Scotland prosperous and proud as
Only
a
some
result
of them,
of that.
though, right?
Ross Greer.
Lord Offord, let's look at Reform's history of admiration for violent thugs. Your former leader in Wales is currently doing 10 years in prison for
Never
taking
met the man, never met the
bribes
man.
from Putin's
Never met the
Russia.
man.
You can't distance yourself from
Never
a former
met him.
senior leader of your party.
Never met
Nigel
him.
Farage, you
Never
can't
met
distance yourself from him. Mr.
I'm not.
Farage has expressed admiration for Vladimir Putin. You've heaped praise on Donald Trump. In fact, Reform wanted the UK to join Trump's war on Iran, a war that is pushing up bills for people across this country. Reform is trying to convince people that the threat comes from immigrants, from asylum seekers, even from children in Glasgow who speak more than one language. Isn't the real threat the traitors in your party and the super-rich donors pulling your strings?
Mr. Greer, I'm sure we'll come back to this. In the land that you live in, Mr. Trump, I know, is the devil incarnate. The reality
War
is,
criminal.
He's not a war. The reality is,
Tell that to
first of all, he's the
little
most
girls
Scottish.
that he
First of all, he's
bombed.
the most Scottish president we've had. Right now, he's hosting our king and monarch in Washington, and he loves Scotland. He's a big employer in Scotland. He creates employment in Scotland.
He's a
he
war
creates
criminal.
jobs in Scotland. We should
He's
be
a war criminal.
welcoming to Donald Trump, whether we like it or not, because at the end of the
Why
day,
is it that so many
whether
people
you-
in your
whether you
party
like
like
it or
Donald
Ross Greer,
Trump
let
and
whether
Malcolm
you
Offord
like it or
answer
not,
something.
he is the democratically elected president of the United States. You need to grow up, Mr. Greer.
Your party is full of people who don't just admire Trump, they admire Putin. You had a candidate that you stood by for weeks who had been doing Nazi salutes, and it took your party weeks of defending him before they eventually dropped him. What is it about Reform and these violent thugs that you just seem to
30
be so
seconds.
enamoured by?
Why are you not asking me about my policies, about how to make Scotland
Because you have almost
successful?
no policies.
Why are you
There's not one mention of
why are you not
childcare.
asking me about
There's
how
not
we
one
make
mention of childcare in your
Scots
manifesto.
prosperous, get our young people back to work, get our long-term unemployed back to
Here's
work.
a policy question.
Can we
Why
talk
is
about that?
childcare not mentioned once in your manifesto?
Because the best childcare we can give any child is to grow up in a family that works and creates prosperity,
Last time.
and that is our ambition.
The majority of children in Scotland who live in poverty are in working households. We want to boost their wages and provide them with the childcare their families need. Reform have nothing to offer them but
Very
hate
briefly,
division.
Malcolm Offord.
Yes, I know you come from the world of handouts. I want to be in the world of hand-ups.
OK, next in the spotlight is Alex Cole-Hamilton, and Sarwar starts the questioning.
Alex, as you've already heard, I was an NHS dentist before coming into politics, and the NHS is personal to me as it is to everyone watching this programme. Too many Scots are waiting too long for treatment, and too many are being forced to go private. People can't get a GP appointment, they can't get their hip replacements in time, and there are far too many waiting too long. The NHS is too often not there when people need it. I've said as First Minister that I will cut NHS waiting lists, I'll end the ATM rush for a GP, and I'll bring back the family doctor. But that only happens if we remove the SNP from office. Now, you've had promises from the SNP before that they've failed to deliver. So do you agree it's not about propping up the SNP, it's about removing them from office?
I absolutely agree. I think that for all of the questions that Scotland currently faces, the answer to none of them is a third decade of SNP neglect. We have 800,000, the equivalent of 800,000 people waiting for some kind of medical treatment right now. And that isn't because of a deficiency of care in our hospitals. It's because our hospitals can't discharge the 2,000 Scots I spoke about earlier from our nation's hospitals into care beds or care packages. And that's leaving people 25 hours in a corridor in an accident emergency. That isn't a place of treatment, that's a place of waiting.
Let me ask you another question about mental health. Right now, there are far too many people, when they get into crisis, that their mental health is responded to by a police officer rather than a paramedic or a mental health nurse. That's why we would set up a mental health emergency service that would free up police officers to fight crime and support communities, and it would mean that there is appropriate treatment for those that find themselves in a mental health crisis. But that again only happens if we remove the SNP from office and not prop them up. They have made promises to you before on mental health and failed to deliver. Will you stop propping up the SNP and help beat the SNP and remove them from office?
I've no intention of propping up the SNP, and I met this morning a dentistry nurse actually who is the partner of a police officer who was a first responder at a suicide yesterday who needs exactly the service you're speaking of. That's why Lib Dems support the idea of an emergency crisis walk-in centre like Sam H are piloting in Glasgow right now. But we also need to look after our frontline workers as well. The impact of that
you've finished now.
Will be brutal.
Ross Greer.
Alex, the Lib Dems have regularly joined the Greens in condemning the damage that Donald Trump has done to people here in the UK and across the world. In fact, we're the only parties who've opposed the King's state visit to the United States. The victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Andrew Windsor have asked the King to meet with them while he's there. The King and his late mother gave Andrew Windsor £12 million for the compensation payment to Virginia Giuffre. Do you share my anger that the King won't meet the victims and their families?
Well, first and foremost, I don't think the King should be there at all. Davey and the UK Liberal Democrats have been very clear, and I support it, that actually, given that Donald Trump has launched an illegal war in Iran, killed tens of thousands of people, brought our economy to his knees, that he shouldn't be graced with a visit from our monarch. But yes, I agree. I think that it would be a good thing to do for His Majesty to meet with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein.
And you mentioned the war in Iran that Donald Trump's leading, that Reform tried to, and the Conservatives tried to drag the UK into. That's causing prices across the UK to go up. Do you think it's right that a Scottish government-owned airport at Prestwick is being used for hundreds of US military flights as part of this campaign against Iran?
I am deeply concerned.
1 minute.
I'm deeply concerned about the unfolding tensions in the Middle East. And it's clear that international law was not observed, that we're talking about the deaths of tens of thousands of people. We've all described this as a cost of living election. The only reason this is now a cost of living election is because people are seeing their energy prices surge, their fuel pump prices surge. But it's more than that. Donald Trump has destabilised the international order of things. He is ripping up the rule book and making it the law of the jungle. We need a strong UK government to say to Donald Trump, not in our name, not in our name.
And would you agree with the Greens' proposal that, given the evidence that's been submitted to the United States Congress, that there should be an investigation into the finances of the Trump organisation here in the UK, particularly given that some of the guilty verdicts in Trump's New York trial were in relation to his Scottish golf course?
I think that if a crime has been committed in the UK, which has aided and abetted this kind of behaviour, then absolutely we would support that kind of investigation.
Russell Findlay.
At the last election, the Lib Dems didn't get a single MSP voted on the peach ballot paper. The Scottish Conservatives got enough in to stop an SNP majority, which is why people across Scotland should do so again this year. Now, pro-UK voters want pro-UK parties to stand up to the SNP. I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah.
So can you tell them why you backed the last two SNP budgets?
Well, firstly, Russell, thank you for bringing this up, because at a more recent election, the general election of 2024, we actually overtook the Scottish Conservative Party. We trebled our seats and we came within touching distance of the SNP.
Why did you back the budget? Why did you back the SNP budgets? You just said earlier you would prop up the SNP. You've backed their two budgets.
So the reason we back these budgets is very simple, and I think that the people watching at home would expect that in a parliament of minorities where there is no inbuilt majority, they would expect people to be grown-ups, to roll up their sleeves, and where necessary, put aside their differences to get things done. Let me finish. I'm going to tell you why we back the budget.
You secured an undertaking from John Swinney that he wouldn't spend any more money on independence.
Let me tell you about it.
He broke that promise.
So let me tell you.
You're either naive or gullible or what? I don't know. Which is
Russell, let me explain. Let me explain. So in words that you can understand. Backing an SNP budget is not a referendum on 19 years of administration, which by any metric they have failed the people of Scotland on. It's a means of unpicking the damage, and it meant that we could get £178 million for business rate relief, particularly in hospitality, who've had it really tight. We've got £70 million for Scotland colleges. My personal favourite, let me tell my personal favourite.
Tax rises,
getting
that's what you did.
For services
But
for the 1,500 babies who've been born
Alex,
addicted to drugs, Russell.
You don't only back SNP
30
tax
seconds.
rises, you also back things like Nicola Sturgeon's gender self-ID law. You still support that, don't you?
In terms of gender self-ID, we've been clear. It remains.
support it.
Sorry, in terms of gender recognition, it remains an unanswered question. But the Liberal Democrats are not going to relitigate it in this Parliament. We're not bringing it back. We recognise the damage it's done in our community, particularly to the trans community. We think this needs to find its level, and when we need to come back to it, we'll bring it back on a four nations.
When you've shown that you are far too weak to do so.
Will you let me finish? So, and we would take it back on a four nations basis, but we're not going to relitigate gender recognition reform right now. It's caused too much division.
But you still believe in it.
OK, that's enough. John Swinney.
Could I begin by thanking Alex Cole-Hamilton warmly for the support that he gave to the two budgets that have been brought forward by my Finance Secretary under my term in office as First Minister. And I think it's fair to conclude from the fact that the Liberal Democrats supported the two budgets brought forward under my leadership, that those budgets contain good measures that are beneficial to the people of Scotland. Could I ask Alex that should I be re-elected as First Minister, would he be prepared to engage constructively in further dialogue about making sure that the budget provision can reflect all of the priorities of the people of Scotland, including Liberal Democrat priorities?
Well, can I thank the First Minister for the decency of that question. But as I've said before, I think in a parliament of minorities, people watching at home would want people to lay aside their differences and get things done in the interests of this country. Now, I've been very clear, John. I think the change that Scotland really needs is a change of government. I think that you deserve some time of quiet reflection on the opposition benches of this country. But if you do somehow make it back to Butte House, it won't be with Liberal Democrat votes, then we will lay aside our differences where we can find common ground again and get things like the money for neurodiversity waiting times or Corsford College or our hospices, which is something the Liberal Democrats fought really hard for and wouldn't have been in your budgets before. But of course, we will act like grown-ups, we will get things done.
Well, I welcome that confirmation from the Liberal Democrats that should I be returned as First Minister, they will be the Liberal Democrats will be willing parties to negotiate on future budget provisions in Scotland. But I wonder if you could just clarify whether or not the support that you've expressed tonight for the election of a Labour government is the position that the Liberal Democrats are comfortable with, given the fact that the Labour government in the United Kingdom isn't lifting a finger to help people out in the energy crisis and tried to take winter fuel payments away from pensioners in Scotland.
I think you must be attending a different debate, John. I haven't said at any point that I would support the installation of a Labour government. I support a change. If that marries up with my vision of how that change should look, then of course I'll look carefully at it. But you're right about fuel. And let me say, you know, that's why the Lib Dems want to see a 10p reduction in our fuel duty for 12 pence at the pump for every motorist, for every litre of fuel that you use. We want to see a price cap on heating oil. And we want to see that programme of home insulation to drive down energy.
Right, Malcolm Offord.
So I was a minister in the Scotland office led by Alistair Jack, which used Section 35 of the Scotland Act to veto the gender recognition reform bill passed by Holyrood in 2022. And this unprecedented step was not taken lightly, but our primary motive was protection of women and girls. My question, Alex Cole-Hamilton, is this: that the Lib Dems, as has been mentioned, voted in favour of GRR in 2022. When that bill is brought back, if it is brought back by a coalition between the SNP and the Greens, will you now vote against it to protect women and girls?
Firstly, Liberal Democrats are not looking to bring this legislation back.
No, but if it's brought back
I'm
by
answering your question.
The alliance of
But let me explain why we support it and support it still. And that's because it doesn't allow people access to a space they weren't allowed yesterday. It allows trans people the dignity to have who they are reflected in the documents that we as a nation require them to hold, the birth certificate, the death certificate. And let's be clear, the biggest threat to women in public spaces are not trans people, it's predatory men. I want to spend a lot of this Parliament focused on violence against women and girls, whether that's enacting aspects of the domestic abuse legislation that are still
so let me pick up on that, because last week the First Minister visited my hometown of Greenock. I went to kick a football around at Greenock Morton at Capitol Park with Martin Compson. And in the same week in Greenock, an assault took place in a women's prison where a female inmate was attacked by a biological male inmate self-certifying as a woman. My question for you is this: will you join me in condemning Mr Swinney and being in Greenock and being silent on that matter? And will you agree with me that there's no place for biological males in women's toilets, in women's sport, in women's prisons?
Fundamentally, we need to protect women from rape. If there's any suggestion that a prisoner is going to rape another prisoner, they should not be housed in the female estate. This is not the responsibility of politicians at the moment. It's a dynamic risk assessment by the Scottish Prison Service. But that prisoner should not have had access to women. But let's remember, while you're talking about these examples, there are people at the heart of this, people who want this discussion to go away because it's caused so much division and so much hate in our society.
Now, let's take another break. We'll be back in 2 minutes for more cross-examination. Welcome back for more campaign cut and thrust at the STV Leaders Debate. And as well as STV, we're live on ITV Border, the STV Player and YouTube. And you can join the debate online using the hashtag STV Debate. Next to face cross-examination is Ross Greer. And first to question him is John Swinney.
Ross, you and I are both supporters of Scottish independence, and we see Scottish independence as a means of enabling Scotland to use our energy wealth to bring down fuel bills and also to get a pathway for Scotland back into the European Union. And we've both been members of the Scottish Parliament for the last 10 years, where there's been a majority of independents supporting MSPs in the Scottish Parliament, but that majority has been ignored by the Westminster Parliament. Do you agree with me that the precedent of the 2011 election, with the election of a majority of SNP MSPs, is the only occasion that we've secured a referendum, and repeating that precedent in 2026 would be the strength and the only pathway to deliver Scottish independence?
I'm a supporter of Scottish democracy, and I think that the voters of this country should get what they want at each election. If a majority of MSPs are sent to Parliament from pro-independence parties, that is a mandate to pursue the cause of independence. I wouldn't second-guess the motivations of SNP voters in the same way that I'm sure you wouldn't second-guess the motivation of Green voters. I do think our movement needs to focus less on the process of achieving a referendum, though, and more on persuading people why Scottish self-government is in their interest. A bare majority of people in Scotland support independence. But John, wouldn't it be best if we used the powers that we've already got to the greatest extent that we can to help people save money and convince them that Holyrood acts in their best interest, not Westminster?
Well, that's exactly what my government has done over the term in office that we have had, to make sure we're on the side of people at all times. But we want to make this happen, Ross. We want to make sure that Scotland becomes independent and has a choice. And the only way we've demonstrated that can happen is with an SNP majority.
Every vote for the Scottish Greens on the 7th of May is a vote for an independent Scotland back in the European Union. But surely if you were First Minister on the 8th of May and we had a pro-independence majority Parliament, you would still at that point go to Westminster and say the people of Scotland have given us the mandate to pursue the cause of independence.
Malcolm Offord.
Mr Greer, I was born in a tenement at 33 Bank Street in Greenock. And back then, Scottish education was the best in the UK, and I got it all for free at Gown Primary and Greenock Academy at Edinburgh University. I went to London 40 years ago with £2,000 in debt, and full of ambition. I worked hard and I was successful. Today, I own 6 houses, 5 cars and 6 boats. And in a 40-year business career, I've employed hundreds of thousands of people and paid £45 million in tax. I don't say that to boast, but to ask you this question. Mr Greer, in your Scotland, do you want more people like me or fewer people like me?
Fewer people like you. I'm glad you finally admitted how many homes that you have, Lord Offord. I think it's worth at this point in the debate pointing out that there are 3 times as many holiday homes and empty properties in this country as there are homeless children. You don't need 6 homes. You don't even need 2 homes. Everybody just needs a home to live in. Surely, if we're to tackle the housing crisis, the super rich elite individuals like you should be giving up some of those homes so that people who desperately need a roof over their head actually have somewhere to live.
So my second question is this, that you have an extremist manifesto for Scotland. You wish to legalise drugs, abolish prisons, you want open borders for all comers, except, of course, for the English.
What?
In your Scotland, the land of milk and honey, everything is free. Okay?
It's because we would tax people like you to pay for it,
And
Malcolm.
yet the Bible tells us that hell's got no borders, but heaven does. Mr Greer, in your Scotland, when you were Deputy First Minister, have you agreed with Mr Swinney about how many immigrants would be
30
too many?
seconds.
We've just seen today the national records showing that Scotland is heading towards population decline. If we're to keep our NHS going, if we're to keep our social care services going, if we're to keep schools open in our rural communities, then we need immigration in this country. I'm proud of the fact that Scotland is a welcoming nation. I am disgusted by the fact that Reform have chosen not just to attack people who've come to live here. You attacked children in Glasgow because they could speak more than one language. Don't you owe those children an apology? I thought it was quite creepy that Reform was attacking children.
And that's Sarwar.
Ross, you and I agree that we need to challenge climate change. It's probably the biggest challenge of our generation. But we will lose the fight against climate change if people believe it means higher bills, greater insecurity and fewer jobs. Today, over 40% of Scotland's electricity supply came from nuclear sources. But right now, you and the SNP oppose those jobs being here and want them to go elsewhere. As First Minister, I will end the ideological bloc to clean nuclear energy, and that will unlock billions of pounds of new investment, protect jobs and create thousands of new jobs and deliver greater energy security. Why won't you back it?
The Scottish Greens will always oppose new nuclear in Scotland, and the great news for this country is we don't need it. We have an abundance of energy potential in renewables. We can create tens of thousands of high-quality jobs in renewables. The Greens have a plan to do that. I would contrast that with what the UK Labour government has done to the workers at Grangemouth and the workers at Exxon's Mossmoran site in Fife. Labour buried their heads in the sand, pretended that these jobs weren't going to go. We all knew they were. The Greens worked with the trade unions at Mossmoran to come up with transition plans. The UK government was nowhere to be seen.
But let's remember, Ross, that your co-leader was actually protesting outside Grangemouth, calling for it to close.
Calling for a transition.
40% today. And there's almost 10,000 jobs right now linked to nuclear, which are due to be at risk because of the ideological bloc, which means nuclear energy will end in 2030.
New nuclear is wildly expensive and it would take far too long to get online.
Renewables and to protect oil and gas.
We can get renewables online rapidly. New nuclear is monumentally expensive and it would simply take far too long. What we need in Scotland is far more investment in renewable energy. I've been supporting a business on the west coast who are setting up a factory to manufacture undersea cables for our offshore wind. That's high quality manufacturing.
You were part of a government that missed its climate change target. Surely you find that embarrassing and shameful. Are you more of a nationalist than an environmentalist?
The only way that we can tackle the climate crisis that we face is if Scotland has the full powers of a normal nation so that we can, for example, block any new North Sea oil and gas fields. It would be insanity to defy climate science with more North Sea oil and gas.
Russell Findlay.
I'll answer that. Yes, he is. He's more interested in backing the SNP than he is in protecting the environment. John Swinney said that he will hold a vote on another referendum in the very first week of Parliament. Will you back that vote?
Of course, the Greens believe that Scotland should be an independent nation. Every vote for the Scottish Greens is a vote for an independent Scotland back in the European Union so that we can use the full powers of independence to tackle the big crises that we face, like the climate crisis.
The SNP B team, that's what the Greens are in Scotland. Some people think out there potentially...
Is that why we're pulling ahead of you, Russell?
Some people think the Greens are still about the environment, but you've got a raft of extreme policies. You want to legalise heroin and crack cocaine, you want to withdraw from NATO, you want to double the benefits bill and abolish prisons. You're detached from public opinion. So which of these extreme policies is your price for getting a seat in a John Swinney cabinet?
The top priorities for the Scottish Greens in the next Parliament will be universal free bus travel and fixing childcare across our country.
1 minute.
We also want to help people heat their homes for less. We want a home insulation programme that makes it easier and cheaper for people to heat their homes. And critically, we want to help people swap out that gas boiler for a heat pump so we're not dependent on volatile gas prices.
What we want to do is cut people's taxes to reward...
You want to cut the taxes of the wealthiest, of the highest earners.
Taxes for everyone that goes out and grafts
and devastate services like the
living.
NHS.
You've bragged about increasing taxes on those earning £33,000 a year. Do you think that's someone who's rich?
People on £33,000 a year pay pennies more than they would elsewhere in the UK, and in exchange, their children can travel on the bus for free. If they're a young person themselves, they can travel for free. Free university tuition, free social care.
To the taxes that you would put on people.
We're proud of the fact that Scotland's the only part of the UK where child poverty is falling, in part because we've asked those with the broadest shoulders to pay a bit more to help us tackle that child poverty.
You want to shut down Scotland's oil and gas industry with the loss of thousands of jobs.
You've run out of time. Alex Hamilton.
Ross, the A9 is perhaps the most lethal road in the British Isles. Every week, someone is injured, and more often than not, they're killed on its miles. But you said that a vote for the Greens is a vote at this election to scrap the dualling of the A9. In fact, you said it's one of the places you would take money for all the other budget commitments from. How do you justify that to voters in the Highlands who use that road every day in fear of their life?
The A9 needs important safety upgrades, but one of the most critical things we can do to make the A9 safer is to move heavy goods vehicles off it. The key way to do that is by dualling the Highland Main Line. It's ridiculous that we've got a single-track rail line north of Perth. We need to move more of that freight onto the rail line, because very often the tragic accidents that happen on the A9 are when people are trying to get round those lorries, get round those heavy goods vehicles. If we were serious about safety upgrades, we would make those upgrades to the road, and we would make sure we were dualling the Highland Main Line to get more of that freight off the road, to get more of those HGVs off the road. That's the safety first approach.
The upgrade that the A9 needs, the A96 needs, the A75 and the Borders needs is dualling, because otherwise it is absolutely lethal. I knock more doors, perhaps more than any other leader in this election, and lots of them in the Highlands, and people fear that it will one day take their lives or the lives of their kids. Ross, one of your lead candidates at this election said, and I quote, that road building is a subsidy for wealthy, usually white men. What on earth are you on about? Why are you putting this weird ideology before road safety?
As I said, the best way that we can improve safety is to make those safety upgrades. For the A96, for example, the Nairn bypass, that is a really important bit of work that we need to be doing. Dualling the whole road is not the way to make it the most safe. As I said, for the A9 in particular, the Highland Main Line, that rail line, if we dual that, we can have more freight on that, we can have fewer lorries on the road, because so many of the accidents are caused by the number of lorries. That's the evidence-based approach.
It's now on our Sarwar's turn to take questions, beginning with Malcolm Offord.
Mr Sarwar, I've heard you say often in this campaign that you think it's now your turn to be the next First Minister.
That's up to the great people of Scotland.
You've said that John Swinney's had 20 years and that you want just 5. It's a bit like two boys playing at the swings, where John's had 20 goes, you're tugging at him and saying, it's my turn, please give me 5 goes. Why do you feel so entitled to be the next First Minister of Scotland?
I'm sorry, the only person that sounds entitled on this stage today is you, Malcolm, with your 6 houses and your 5 yachts. So I think perhaps you should take a look in the mirror. The people that will decide the First Minister of this country are the great people of this country, the very people that you underestimate every single day. Because you think spreading poison, spreading lies and trying to divide Scots is what are going to help you succeed. I actually think Scotland will reject you and your kind like they have done before, because they see you using Glasgow's children. You think it's a campaign stunt. Glasgow's my home, and they'll reject you. They see what you want to do to divide our communities, and they will see right through it all, Malcolm.
So you're a lifelong member of the Labour Party.
Proudly.
And you're a member of the Labour Together, indeed, with Keir Starmer. You supported Keir Starmer for leader, and you enjoy a close friendship with Peter Mandelson. Now, your manifesto contains the same promises made by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves in 2024 about growing the economy. You won't put taxes up, make work pay, control immigration, clean up politics. And instead what we've got is blatant tax hikes. You've crushed the economy, you've taken money from people who work to those who don't work. Gangs are not smashed, and you're knee-deep in sleaze. Can I ask you, if the Scottish people vote for you, don't they just get the same old Labour?
Reeked in sleaze coming from a former Tory minister that served in the governments of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Let me say directly to people across the country, they're choosing not who the Prime Minister is, but who the First Minister is. And the choice there is between me and John Swinney. All Reform can do is help keep the SNP in power. They can't deliver change.
Russell Findlay.
Mr Sarwar, you put Keir Starmer into Downing Street. He imposed a crippling jobs tax, family farm tax, and he refuses to drill for new oil and gas in the North Sea. But you agree with him on all of that, don't you?
Yeah, look, I am making quite clear that I, like lots of people across the country, will feel disappointed and angry with Keir Starmer. I share that disappointment. But you of all people should know that this election is about electing who the First Minister is and who the Scottish Government is. A vote for me and Scottish Labour in this election is not a vote to endorse Keir Starmer. It won't be used to endorse Keir Starmer.
I'll translate
it's to choose the First Minister.
Agree with Keir Starmer on those points?
Well, I want to change the government here in Scotland, and I'm really surprised, Russell, that you say John Swinney's every excuse is to look at a point at Westminster, it seems you're playing John Swinney's game. I don't want this to be an election that judges 2 years of a Labour government. It's 20 years of an SNP government.
You say you don't trust Keir Starmer to run the country. I agree. But if John Swinney demands another referendum from Keir Starmer, how can you trust him to say no?
Well, that's why this election is not about whether the SNP get a majority or not. It's about whether they get stay in government or not. And the only way to beat the SNP, the only way to reject your old pals in Reform is to vote for Scottish Labour in this election. That's the only route to change. The Tories just give us more of the same.
Do you think you'll listen to a word you say?
Well, as I've already said, my view on Keir Starmer is very open and honest. If only you were as honest about Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. If only John Swinney was as honest about other politicians in his party.
To put the country out its misery and get shot of that dud Prime Minister.
Well, in 9 days' time, we can get rid.
They don't listen to
in 9 days' time, we can get rid of this dud First Minister. I thought you'd be in favour of that, Russell.
I'm all for that.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
And that's, our rural and island communities have been neglected by 19 years of SNP mismanagement. It's one of the reasons I hope they lose power at this election. They deserve to lose power. They could thrive, our communities could thrive, if they had the roads, the ferries and the health services they need. Can Scottish Labour claim to be a party of all of Scotland without addressing this?
Look, we need a government that's for all of Scotland, and I commit to be a First Minister for all of Scotland. And thinking about our island communities in particular, they need ferries that work, they need flights that are affordable. And the reason why is, yes, when we debate it in the Parliament, we talk about economic incompetence and financial mismanagement, but for islanders, it's missed hospital appointments. It is not being able to get their goods off the island or goods onto the island. It's missing out on vital tourism and therefore hammering their local businesses. That's why we will stop the blame game that comes under the SNP where they want to point the blame somewhere else. We'll have a new ferries agency with islanders at the heart of that ferries agency making decisions about what happens in their islands and in their lives.
I'm concerned, though, that during this election, I've not heard you talk about some key infrastructure projects that our island communities and our Highland communities desperately need. Things like rebuilding the Belford Hospital, the Gilbert Bain Hospital, the Raigmore Hospital, or indeed like new tunnels for Shetland. Are you committed to infrastructure projects like these to get Scotland moving and to give those communities the support they need?
We need key infrastructure projects in every region and every part of Scotland. That means fixing the way we do procurement. For example, the £2 billion that's now likely to be spent on the Monklands means less money to spend in other hospitals. The £1 billion that's going to be spent on the new Berlini prison that was supposed to cost £100 million means 40 fewer community health centres that we could have built. That's why I'm absolutely happy, if I'm First Minister, to look at all of these projects in the national interest, but that requires removing the SNP from office.
Ross Greer.
I agree.
And as we stand together when it comes to supporting the people of Ukraine, we agree on the need to boycott Russia. But when Greens brought proposals to the Scottish Parliament for Scotland to boycott Israel because of the genocide they're committing in Palestine, Labour voted against it. Not only that, but the UK Labour government has armed Israel's genocide on Gaza and literally trained Israeli soldiers here in the UK while they were committing it. Are you not ashamed to be a member of a party that is now directly complicit in a genocide?
Well, let me be really clear. It is a genocide. The person to blame for this genocide is Benjamin Netanyahu, and I look forward to the day that he stands trial at the ICC and the ICJ, because I want people in Israel and in Palestine to be able to live in peace, freedom and security. The debate you're referencing directly is if there are specifics about what is around boycotts and sanctions and disinvestment from an Israeli government, that's a very different argument. I think we have to be careful, though, because some people, I'm not saying the mainstream and I'm not saying the majority, but there are some people
and as if Netanyahu's a war criminal, why are you selling him arms?
Jewish communities.
If Benjamin Netanyahu's a war criminal, and you're absolutely right that he is, the UK Labour government are selling him arms and training his army. How can you hold that on the one hand and on the other hand say he's a war criminal? You've just admitted that the Labour Party is quite literally training the army of a war criminal and using public money here in the UK to do that.
I think we need to be really careful, though, Ross, when you're talking about many of those defence companies that exist exist in Scotland.
The UK military is training the Israeli military under the Labour
welders that
Party.
work on the Clyde or on Rosyth. They aren't part of a genocide. They're getting on with building the
You
ships
would keep
that this
using
country
public money to
needs.
fund a genocide.
Anything that has any connection to any genocide should not have any public money at
You
all.
voted against
and
that,
I will be
though.
unequivocal in that.
When the Greens
as
brought
First
that
Minister.
motion to the Scottish Parliament, you voted against it.
It's
We wanted
because-
not a penny of Scottish public
time.
money to go to arms dealers that are supplying Israel.
Any
You
hint
opposed that.
of any complicity in any actions illegal by Benjamin Netanyahu, I will take robust action.
John Swinney.
Anas, a few weeks ago you called for Keir Starmer to resign, and today you've called on Labour MPs to vote for him to stay in office.
That's not what the vote was,
Which
John.
one is it?
John, that's not what the vote was. Today, a party political stunt that actually was the SNP, Reform and the Tories joining forces 9 days out from an election. I thought you didn't want to work with Reform. I'm very clear about calling out the actions and the failures whenever I see it. That's the difference between you and I. Because you were part of a party when 2 of the last 3 SNP First Ministers were arrested by Police Scotland and you stayed by their side. You are the man that appointed Peter Murrell to be the Chief Executive of the SNP, and you take no responsibility at all with what's happened. And when we talk about the ferries or the prisons, the question I have for you is, why is the SNP always good at losing money? Where does the money go, John?
But the problem that you've got, Anas, is that you've said one thing for Keir Starmer to resign when you thought it would benefit you personally and electorally.
That's not what the vote was
and then today you've done a U-turn, as always. And that's what worries people about you.
I stand by what I said in February.
On the last STV debate we were on, you said voting Labour would save Grangemouth, and Grangemouth is shut. Why did you let Grangemouth shut? Why did the Labour government let down the people of Grangemouth?
Why did you ignore the warnings for 10 years on Grangemouth and failed to act? £120 million.
Why did you promise? Why did you promise to save Grangemouth and then fail to deliver on that?
I'm more than happy to answer the question. £120 million went in to protect jobs on the petrochemical site. I wish more could have been done to do more on the other side
and you
of
failed
the site.
to deliver.
For 10 years you got warnings and you never acted.
You promised and you failed to deliver. You misled the public.
Else. You don't take responsibility.
You
and
promised
that's
something to the public
and
they were misled.
Where does the money always go, John?
The money goes to support the people of Scotland.
Tell the SNP membership that.
That's your 2 minutes up. And that brings us to the end of Sarwar's cross-examination. We're now more than halfway through the debate. Oh, it's exciting. What's the spin room making of it all? Let's rejoin Rona.
Well, it really is exciting. There's been some really lively cross-examination, hasn't there? We've been glued to our seats, and there's been some moments of light relief as well, hasn't there, Lucy and Kieran? When Malcolm Offord talked about his 6 houses, was it 5 boats and 6 cars?
5 cars, 6 boats is my count, but I could have been wrong there, I think.
Yeah.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, and he did get quite a hard time, didn't he?
Yeah, I think, speaking to some of the Reform team in the room, that maybe there's some sort of pleasant surprise that Malcolm Offord maybe hasn't been grilled as much as they were expecting. Obviously, that shows that they were expecting him to be grilled quite significantly. I think there's a couple of things to pick up from what Reform have been saying on this, what Malcolm Offord has said. And actually, ultimately, one of those things is the Constitution. Now, Reform UK, obviously, before that, in previous iterations, was the Brexit Party. But Reform doesn't really want to talk about referendums, whether that be the independence referendum or Brexit, partly because the party is trying to appeal from voters, from all sides of the political spectrum. So I think that definitely came across. And what also came across to me was that Nigel Farage, the shadow of Nigel Farage, certainly looms large in Scotland, and a number of other party leaders have been trying to use Farage's unpopularity north of the border to really make a mark on their attacks with Malcolm Offord.
Yeah, and John Swinney said at one point that Malcolm Offord and Reform had soured the debate, poisoned the campaign, so he wasn't pulling any punches there.
He wasn't. None of the leaders were. One of the interesting things I think about this was all of the opposition leaders had really different areas that they wanted to attack Reform on. There's a few areas where they would have seen potential weaknesses. Candidates were brought up. That's what John Swinney was kind of getting at. Candidates would make very controversial statements. But I think Reform might feel a little bit happy on one side of that they'll think it could look like the establishment ganging up on their guy, which is a key part of their campaign.
Yes, and Ross Greer, I mean, he was accused of being a Green in name only and part of a government that missed its climate change target. That was Anas Sarwar to Ross Greer, so he didn't get off scot-free either.
Absolutely. I think what I find interesting about the attacks on Ross Greer and the Green Party were that a lot of them were on reserved issues. For example, you know, foreign policy, like stance on NATO, immigration, independence, culture war type stuff. And actually, what I think Ross Greer was quite successful at was putting across his message for this campaign, which ultimately is about buses and childcare. It's quite straightforward and actually is devolved. And I think that's probably a lesson that some of the other party leaders could maybe take.
And Anas Sarwar, once again, just not being able to get away from the whole Keir Starmer issue.
Well, it's the thing that's dogged Anas Sarwar for the entire time that Labour have been in power across the UK. It's one of the reasons why he called for Keir Starmer to quit, but you can't escape him even this week. The UK government in another muddle of its own making, and that feeds into the point. One of the reasons why the other leaders are so aggressive with the Greens and Reform is because they're taking their votes, because folk are scunnered.
And Keir Starmer will continue to haunt him, no doubt. Thank you both. More cross-examination coming up. Time now for a quick break.
Welcome back to this STV Leaders Debate live from the Signet Library in Edinburgh. Next to face cross-examination is Russell Findlay. First to question him is Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Russell, Boris Johnson partied while people couldn't bury their loved ones. Liz Truss then crashed the economy, sending people's mortgages through the roof. More recently, Kemi Badenoch backed Donald Trump in calling for the UK to bomb Iran just a few weeks ago without a thought for how it would hit families with higher petrol prices or energy bills or cancelled holidays because of the jet fuel shortages. Is it any wonder that you got absolutely battered at the general election and that the Scottish Liberal Democrats overtook you?
So none of that stuff is on me. I'm new to politics. I've been doing this for a few years.
You're
and I can tell you that after the general election, Kemi Badenoch and I took charge of the party around about the same time. And we recognised, and we've been completely honest with people.
You disagreed with her about Iran?
We've been completely honest with people about where we went wrong and realised, unlike some other parties, I'm looking at the SNP, that where we make mistakes, we hold our hands up and we recognise that.
Do you disagree with Kemi on Iran?
Public trust. Well, what Kemi Badenoch said in respect
that
of
we should
Iran,
all just pile in with America.
No, she didn't say that. What she said
she
was
did combat
that we
operations.
should absolutely defend our British overseas personnel on bases that were under attack, and indeed our allies in the Gulf.
She did back Donald Trump. Let me ask you something else. In this Parliament, we saw the first ever defection across the floor between parties, and that was Jamie Green when he courageously left the Conservative Party to join the Liberal Democrats. He did that because he couldn't recognise the party he joined under Ruth Davidson. Do you recognise that there are many voters who are leaving the Tories in disgust at what you've become and are backing the Lib Dems on that second peach-coloured ballot in this election?
I was out with Ruth Davidson just 2 days ago, and she was telling the people of Scotland to back the Scottish Conservatives on the peach ballot paper, and that's what we will continue to do. If you and Jamie Green think cutting taxes, addressing the benefits bill and fixing public services is extreme, then you're on the wrong side of this.
John Swinney.
Russell, on one of the other election debates, there was lots of talk about grubby deals between the Labour Party and Reform, between Anas Sarwar and Malcolm Offord. Have you ever had any discussions with Labour about working together after the election?
I like to leave these secret conversations between Anas and Lord Offord. I have no idea what's being spoken about. What I'm doing, John, is focusing on getting as many Scottish Conservative MSPs back into Holyrood as possible and removing an SNP government after 20 disastrous years of failing Scotland.
So given that answer, are Conservative voters entitled to take the view that if they vote Conservative, they will end up with a Labour government in Scotland if you get your way?
You vote Conservative and you get the SNP out. In 2021, we stopped an SNP majority by using the peach ballot paper to get as many Scottish Conservatives back in as possible.
But just be honest with voters.
We stopped that majority then.
But just be honest with voters in Scotland.
We're being crystal clear.
If they vote for the Conservatives, based on what you've just told me, they'll end up with the potential of a Labour government propped up by Reform in the Scottish Parliament. Is that what you're offering the people of Scotland?
You will have a pro-UK party, proudly so, standing up for Scottish taxpayers. And I will move heaven and earth. I've seen the damage you've done to Scotland.
So you're quite prepared. You're quite prepared to inflict another Labour government on the people of Scotland, knowing how useless the Westminster Labour government is, how much of a failure they are, and you are prepared to work together with Reform and Labour to install a Labour government. Is that what you want to happen in Scotland?
What I'm not prepared to do is to inflict on the people of Scotland another 5 miserable, wasted, disastrous years of a John Swinney
a Labour government on the people of Scotland. Another useless Labour government on the people of Scotland.
Ross Greer.
Russell, the Tories' big offer at this election is a tax cut that would give the most money to those who are already the richest in our society. You would have to make £4 billion of cuts to public services to do it, but you won't say what services you would cut. The Scottish Greens would tax the super rich and big businesses like Amazon fairly to get more teachers into our classrooms and to fix our care services. Why do you want to repeat exactly the same kind of unfunded tax cuts that Liz Truss delivered to crash the UK economy?
We are proudly on the side of Scotland's hard-working taxpayers. Right now in Scotland, due to SNP taxes backed by your party, Scots are paying £1.8 billion a year more. These aren't rich people, these are people on pretty modest incomes.
Your tax plan would benefit those very rich people the most, wouldn't it?
Our tax plans would...
Thousands upon thousands of pounds.
Our tax plans would quite properly cut taxes for everyone in Scotland. You and the SNP only want to keep turning the screw.
You think the super rich need a tax cut?
We want to make work pay.
You want to repeat Liz Truss's unfunded tax cuts. So can I ask, are you paying more for your mortgage now, like I am, as a result of what Liz Truss did to the economy?
Well, look, we've both got a mortgage, unlike some of our fellow contestants or panellists here tonight. The point is that £33,000 a year, people are paying more tax in Scotland. That is not a wealthy salary. That's not
for a little bit. At
£33,000,
you're paying a little bit more, and you get free bus travel if you're a young person, or if you have young people, free university tuition, free social care. Do you not recognise that people in Scotland are willing to pay a little bit more to get those services? And your tax cuts aren't for the people on 33 grand. They're for the people on 100, 150 grand.
Our tax cuts are for everybody who works for a living in Scotland.
But they're the biggest for the highest earners.
And
why is that
unlike
fair?
any other manifesto produced by any party at this election, ours is fully costed.
No, there's a £4 billion gap.
Incredible. Absolutely not. We spell out exactly where money comes from, how we would make those savings, and how we'd finally give taxpayers a long-deserved break.
You want to do to Scotland what Liz Truss did to the whole of the UK?
Absolutely not.
Russell Findlay, you have already admitted in the campaign that it's not credible for you to be the First Minister. And your party is no longer a national party. And your Chief of Staff told me that you had no policies for Scotland other than say no to another referendum. So my question is this. With no policies and no ambition for Scotland, do you think you and your party should even be standing in this election?
We've got a 96-page manifesto filled with detailed policies about how to fix the SNP's mess, about how to fix the NHS, how to fix Scottish education, how to cut taxes, not your flimsy manifesto described by the IFS as a mirage. And also, unlike Reform UK, the pretend unionist party, we will stand up for Scotland's proud place in the Union.
So already in this debate, Mr Findlay, we have already won the argument that we put our manifesto out first. And lo and behold, the parties are now talking about growing the economy, perhaps looking at taxes, perhaps looking about how to get people back to work, perhaps getting our energy prices down. So I have to say, it's a slim document, but less is more. I have one other question for you, though.
It's a mirage.
Reform has a very positive message for Scotland. We want to make Scotland the most successful part of the UK by giving hard-working Scots some money back, by cutting taxes and energy bills and getting our young people into good jobs. My question, Mr Findlay, if the Tories do come back to Holyrood as a minority party, will you support reform to make Scotland the most successful part of the UK?
30 seconds.
Your manifesto's a mirage. These are the words of the IFS. We have always been the party of aspiration, of making work pay, of home ownership, of reducing taxation. Don't pretend this is some great reform invention.
Reform in its
you're fake
to make
unionists.
Scotland the most successful part of the UK.
You're not only fake unionists, you're fake Conservatives.
And that's Sarwar.
Russell, for almost 20 years, Scotland's had a politics that sought to divide Scot from Scot. The SNP have talked endlessly about independence. The Tories have talked endlessly about independence. And while you both had those arguments, NHS waiting lists grew, The attainment gap widened, the housing crisis got worse, and nothing changed. And now I know your ambition is only to oppose the SNP. I want to beat and replace the SNP. After 14 years, we finally got rid of a rotten Tory government, and this election is our chance to finally, after 20 years, get rid of a rotten SNP government. Do you accept that only Scottish Labour can do that?
We have been the largest party in the Scottish Parliament for a decade. Labour have this arrogant sense of entitlement. They think they can just turn up and win the day. In every election since devolution, the number of Labour MSPs has decreased. We will continue. We take nothing for granted. We're not arrogant like Scottish Labour or the SNP. We'll fight for every single vote, and we will put forward to the voters, ask them for a fair hearing, put forward our positive vision to reduce people's taxes, to fix the education system.
The fact of the matter is this, is the only leader on this stage that has beat the SNP and beat reform are me and Scottish Labour. And all you can do is talk about the things that the SNP want you to talk about. So surely you believe in fixing the NHS, making life more affordable and improving the chances of our children. But to do that, we have to get rid of the SNP, not just simply oppose the SNP.
There is a collective dangerous complacency amongst every other leader here about the SNP's threat of another independence referendum. None of us wants to be talking about this. This is a cost of living election. But John Swinney's made it clear, page 1, line 1, the first thing he'll do in Parliament is bring forward a vote in another referendum. We need to stop that.
Briefly.
Let's talk about the NHS. Let's talk about making life more affordable. You talk about independence just as much as John Swinney does.
We want to bring down people's taxes.
And last to face questions from the other leaders is John Swinney, starting with Ross Greer.
John, the Greens and the SNP regularly cooperate to take Scotland forward. I'm proud of that style of politics. But one area where I'm concerned with the Scottish Government's position is on climate. We have across the UK a windfall tax on the obscene profits that oil and gas companies make, but the SNP have called for that to be scrapped. I wanted to check if that was still your position, because this morning BP have reported £2.4 billion of profits just between January and March of this year. Their profits have doubled because of the war in Iran. Surely we should be using that money through government to help people cut the cost of their energy bills, to insulate their homes, rather than just giving it to BP's shareholders and make them even richer while people are struggling to afford to even put the heating on.
Well, I certainly want to make sure that Scotland's energy wealth is used for the benefit of the people of Scotland, because I think people are mesmerised by the fact that they live in such an energy-rich country where we are generating much more energy than we require, but people are paying sky-high fuel bills as a consequence of the way in which the energy markets are designed within the United Kingdom. So, for me, my priority is to make sure that Scotland's energy wealth comes into the control of Scotland, so that we've got in the Scottish Parliament an approach which makes sure that we can take the decisions about Scotland's energy resources, and we can use that wealth to reduce the bills of people in Scotland. And that's why we need to have Scottish independence.
And the Greens agree absolutely on the need for independence. But if we had that, or if energy was devolved, the Greens believe that energy is a public good. It should be taken out of the hands of private companies in terms of how we provide it. But if the likes of BP were still operating, for example, in the North Sea, are you saying that there would be no Scottish windfall tax on these obscene profits?
Well, what I'm saying is that Scotland can take these decisions on energy if Scotland has got that responsibility in our hands.
If the Greens were in a Scottish government, we would want that tax and would use that money to help people make their homes cheaper and easier to heat. Would the SNP, if you're re-elected as First Minister, would we have that kind of windfall tax on these huge profits?
Well, I share the policy objective of reducing bills for individuals in Scotland and making sure that the energy wealth of Scotland is working for the people of Scotland. And just now, under the Union, that's not happening.
And that's Sarwar.
John, tonight I could have asked you thousands of questions about SNP failures over the past 20 years. I've been asked to ask you a question by Kimberly Darrick. My 10-year-old daughter, Millie Main, died after being treated at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, a hospital that your government opened weeks before an election, before it was safe and ready. Millie was recovering from cancer, but she got an unavoidable infection and died. We were never told the true cause of her death. That hospital was open despite warnings it wasn't safe. People died, children got infections, staff were bullied and ignored, and we and other families have been gaslit for years. Why was I not told the truth? And why was there a cover-up? Why was politics more important to you than my daughter's life?
I've expressed to you and us in parliamentary debate, and I've also discussed this issue with the families who have lost loved ones in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, my sympathy and my regret about the fact that they have suffered to the awful extent that they have suffered. When these issues came to light about the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, my late colleague Jean Freeman constituted a public inquiry, and that public inquiry is exploring all of the issues and all of the detail that Kimberley Darragh believes needs to be, that I consider is important.
Kimberley's got a follow-up question.
I'm delighted
Her follow-up question was, I know John Swinney will use the public inquiry as a cover to not answer questions to me and other families. I actually asked Nicola Sturgeon these very same questions 5 years ago, and she promised then that these families would get answers, and they haven't got answers. The promise I make is this, is if I'm First Minister, these families will get the truth and the justice they deserve, not the cover-ups and the secrecy that has become the hallmark of John Swinney and the SNP.
Well, that's the promise I'm delivering, because we have a public inquiry that's getting to the truth about all that happened, and that will be shared openly and transparently with the families, particularly given the fact that I've put in place an oversight group which has got family representatives on it to make sure they can scrutinise. I've made that clear, and I repeat it again tonight.
Malcolm Offord.
So, Mr Swinney, you represent the Scottish National Party and you've been in government for 20 years. As a proud Scot, I cannot understand why we've allowed our great country to decline into mediocrity. All you've done is spend record amounts of taxpayers' money, and yet our education is now worse than England, our NHS is worse than England, our economy grows slower than in England, our people are poorer than in Scotland. For me, I always want to beat the English. So my question for you, Mr Swinney, is this. Do you seriously think that after 20 years of failure, you can win another term in government by offering Scots cheap gimmicks like free school bags, free vouchers for summer concerts and free food banks? Is that really the best you've got?
Well, you see, the characterisation that you've set out, Lord Offord, about Scotland is just not the case, because Scotland has faster economic growth than the rest of the United Kingdom. We had more growth per capita, faster growth per capita over the last 10 years than growth per capita in the rest of the UK. We have the highest levels of literacy and numeracy in our schools. Waiting times in our hospitals, waiting lists in our hospitals are falling under my leadership. Early learning and childcare, which saves families £6,000 a year, has expanded under the SNP government. We have got low unemployment, and we have got strong performance in a whole range of areas in relation to the delivery of transport services in Scotland. So these are the elements of the SNP's record that I think people are judging in Scotland today. And also we want to build on that by ensuring that we take the steps to expand early learning and childcare further, support first-time buyers, and make sure that we deliver a £2 bus fare cap for the buses in Scotland.
Can I just ask one final question? In your 2021 manifesto, you pledged not to raise taxes. Then in government, you did raise taxes twice. If you're re-elected, Mr Swinney, will you raise taxes in Scotland again?
We've said in our manifesto that we will not increase the bands or the rates of taxation within Scotland, and we will act to try to simplify the tax system over the course of the parliamentary term.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
John, the vast majority of Scots are desperate for you to lose this election. I agree, it's why I would resign as leader of my party before voting you back into Butte House. Because on any metric, you have failed as a government. But I want to focus on one. This spring, the SNP's ferries fiasco plumbed new depths, with almost every Scottish island affected by disruption. At one point, 8 CalMac vessels were out of service. In Argyll and Butte, people were missing hospital appointments. Tourists were cancelling trips to the West Highlands, and there were empty shelves in shops in the Outer Hebrides. Can you understand why these communities feel utterly shafted by your government?
I understand the disruption that's been caused to island communities, and that's why I went to the Western Isles by ferry to engage with people directly about these issues. It's also why I've put in place a commitment to a £10 million fund to support local businesses who've been disrupted. But it also comes on top of the introduction of 9 new ferries into the network by the SNP, and we also have 11 ferries that are ordered and coming, and some of them will be here over the summer months. demonstrating the long-term commitment of the Scottish Government to supporting island communities in Scotland.
I was in Ardrossan yesterday. I've seen the anger there. I've seen the anger in Oban. And it's because you haven't extended support to the coastal communities when they needed it. The New York Times are telling Americans that our Scottish islands are beautiful. But in their words, and I quote, "Good luck getting on or off
30 seconds.
You have turned us into a global laughing stock. Can you understand why people in island and coastal communities are absolutely furious with your government?" When Nicola Sturgeon launched a fake ferry in 2017.
The issue here is about ensuring there's a sustainable ferry service, and we've put 9 new vessels into the fleet, and we've got 11 more being added into the fleet. And what I'm determined to do is to make sure island communities have the solid support of a First Minister who's always listening to them, to make sure we encourage people to travel to the islands, as I do every single summer, to spend my holidays in the Scottish Islands, because I'm a committed tourist to the Scottish Islands in our country.
Mr Swinney, you've been at the heart of this SNP government for 2 decades. A government of broken promises, wasted money, constant lies, sleazy ministers, Europe's worst drugs deaths, and forcing Scots to pay the highest tax in the UK. And that's before we even get to the major police investigation into your party's finances. Are you proud of that?
I'm proud of the SNP and the change that we've made in Scottish society, because we've improved lives in Scotland. So when we came to office...
You are seriously saying you're proud of that record?
Yes, I am.
That record of shame.
Because we have expanded early learning and childcare in Scotland. We've delivered more houses per head of population than any other part of the United Kingdom. We've kept unemployment low. We've dealt with the austerity of the Tories. We have supported... We've recovered from the financial crash.
The drugs deaths.
And of course there are challenges in society about drugs death.
Own your record. Own your record, John.
Yeah, and then what we do is we take the action to sort it.
In 2016...
we put in place the rehab strategy on drugs, and we acted to support people.
And in 2021, enough Scots backed us in the peach ballot paper to stop that SNP majority, and I'm fighting tooth and nail to do so again, because you have always put independence above everything else. And if you do get that majority, we'll be back to square one, and it will be the people of Scotland who suffer for another 5 years. Isn't that right?
No, because what independence allows us to do is to make sure we can cut the fuel bills of people in Scotland, we can tackle child poverty with the full powers of an independent country, we can recover from the damage done by the Conservatives over Brexit, and make sure Scotland can have the recovery that Scotland is entitled to.
Do you understand why reasonable Scots are concerned about you wanting to join forces with Sinn Féin to break up the United Kingdom?
I think it's important that First Ministers across all of the 3 devolved governments work together, and I look forward to working together with a Sinn Féin First Minister in Northern Ireland, a Plaid Cymru First Minister in Wales, and working together to make sure that the interests of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland are advanced in cooperation, and I'm very committed to making sure I use that dialogue to deliver independence for Scotland.
OK, well, that fair rushed by. You've seen all the party leaders face each other in cross-examination. We're not quite finished yet. See you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the final part of the STV Leaders Debate. The politicians have faced each other. Now it's their final chance tonight to face you with their closing statements. First comes John Swinney.
The SNP want to lower your bills. Other parties want to stop us. The SNP want to roll out GP walk-in clinics across Scotland. Other parties want to stop us. The SNP want you to have the right to decide on your future. Other parties want to stop us. The best way to deliver for you is by electing a majority SNP government. A vote for the SNP on the 7th of May is a vote for experienced, trusted leadership, with me as First Minister, and in a turbulent world, a government always on Scotland's side.
Russell Findlay.
Tonight has confirmed 2 things. Number 1, John Swinney's only interest is independence, and number 2, Reform, Labour and the Lib Dems are blind to the SNP's referendum threat. But you can put a stop to it. Use your peach ballot paper to back the Scottish Conservatives and stop an SNP majority on the 7th of May. Wherever you live in Scotland, it's the best way to beat the SNP.
And that's Sarwar.
This election's not about us on this panel. It's about you and your chance to change the government here in Scotland. John Swinney and the SNP have had 20 years. Give me 5, and I will show you that together we can make our country better. If you want a government that will cut NHS waiting lists, that will do everything it can to make life more affordable and ensure all our children have the chance to succeed, then on May the 7th, the only way to beat the SNP, to reject reform and to change Scotland is to vote Scottish Labour.
Ross Greer.
This election isn't just a choice between the status quo and the forces of hate and division. You can vote for hope with the Scottish Greens. We delivered free bus travel for young people. Now we want to deliver free bus travel for everyone in Scotland. We will fix our unaffordable and inflexible childcare system. And we will tax the super rich. We will tax elite individuals like Malcolm Offord with his half a dozen houses and his umpteen yachts. We will make sure that they pay their fair share to deliver the fairer, greener, kinder society that we know Scotland can be. So join our movement and vote for the Scottish Greens on that regional peach-coloured ballot paper.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I believe you deserve better than this. Scotland deserves better than a third decade of SNP failure. The Scottish Liberal Democrats are offering you a better way of doing things. So remember, in seats along the West Coast, across the Highlands, East Dunbartonshire, Edinburgh and Fife, we can win against the SNP. But wherever you are, you can elect a Liberal Democrat MSP on your second peach-coloured regional ballot who will deliver change with fairness at its heart.
Malcolm Offord.
Reform in Scotland is a movement of ordinary, decent, hard-working Scots who are fed up with mediocrity. I am so ambitious for Scotland, and Reform believes that we can lead the world again so that you can see everyday improvements in your lives. Canny Scots are grafters and not fooled by gimmicks and freebies. No, we are proud Scots who want to work hard, keep more of our own money and look after our families and our communities. So if you want real change, please vote Reform, the best for Scotland.
Well, there you have it. The leaders have made their pitches and cross-examined each other. Thanks to them for taking part. I hope we've helped you make up your mind. And next Thursday, I hope you enjoy playing your part in democracy and deciding Scotland's future. Now, for some final post-match analysis, back to Rona in the spin room.
Thank you, Colin. A fascinating evening of debate. Plenty for voters to think about. All the political advisers here, no doubt, claiming victory for their own leaders. But Lucy, what did you think just about John Swinney there? He was under a lot of pressure about the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and ferries. You can't go away from these ferries, can he?
Absolutely, and I think he has this issue of obviously being in the party of government, and so you can talk to things that he has actually done, but equally he is being pushed on his party's record. And I think going back to the health point, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has haunted him now for a couple of weeks. Labour have gone very hard on that attack. Now, the SNP talked to the fact that they want to introduce these GP walk-in clinics and an NHS app. You know, these are certainly new issues for Scotland, but they have been around in England before. So I suppose there is that question of big issues and whether that will be enough for people to get really motivated and back the SNP again. But certainly I did feel as though independence dominated that part of the conversation, particularly with the Tories talking so much about it.
Yes, I know, because Russell Findlay was accused of talking about independence more than the SNP, wasn't he?
Well, it's been the kind of lifeblood of both the SNP and the Conservatives for quite a few elections in Scotland. Now, it's been a fight over independence. That suits both parties down to the ground. John Swinney's happy talking about that. Russell Findlay thinks it G's up his troops as well. So, I mean, it's no surprise really that it was pretty comfortable ground for both leaders at that point.
Yeah, and what did we make of Alex Cole-Hamilton?
Well, I think, you know, the leader of the Liberal Democrats has been agreeing actually across the board with a number of different parties, and I think he was pushed a bit on the fact that he's backed SNP budgets before. He was also pushed on whether or not he would join forces with Labour to try and keep the SNP out of government, and he's certainly been, you know, wishy-washy on this in the past, changed his message a couple of times. Certainly his focus was on regional seats, looking around Scotland as opposed to looking to Scotland as a whole, and I suppose that speaks to the target audience that the Lib Dems are trying to go for in this election.
And I suppose no great surprise really that the other five parties really turned on Malcolm Offord tonight, didn't they?
Yeah, that was always going to happen. There's always going to be that fire trained at Malcolm Offord, Reform UK. You know, there's quite a few moving targets, some of which we talked about earlier, and yeah, absolutely, the opposition leaders, they all want to position themselves as being those ones that will stand up to Reform UK. It shows that they're worried about Reform UK. It shows Reform UK are eating into all of their votes and taken predominantly from the unionist parties, as we see through opinion polls, but it shows that they're all a little bit concerned about them there.
Would you agree with what Kieran's saying there, that they are worried?
I think they're certainly worried, and I think that there is an issue, especially UK-wide, about how to take on Nigel Farage and Reform's popularity. And even though, you know, there might be focus after this debate about Malcolm Offord's houses and cars and boats, ultimately the Reform brand is strong because it's anti-establishment, and I think that that has definitely shone through, as Kieran said earlier, in this debate. I think the pushing back against the status quo is something that Reform can do well.
Yeah, 5 boats. I suspect that might be a headline tomorrow. Who needs 5 boats? Good grief. Colin asked at the beginning of the programme who had a big idea about how to fix Scotland. Did anyone have a big idea?
I mean, no, not really. We've seen lots of things. We've seen this through the manifestos, that there's lots of policies that, you know, will in some cases just tinker around the edges. In other cases, as we've seen from independent analysis, are not really backed up by costings or solutions for how to pay for them. And you saw it today. This was a repetition of lines. All the parties were looking for a 3-0 win today. I don't think any of them got it, really.
What do you think voters will make of it? Just very briefly, Lucy.
Yeah, well, I think ultimately, as we said at the very beginning, that people are not particularly enthusiastic about this election, and I'm not entirely sure whether this will have shifted the dial.
All right, Lucy and Kieran, thank you both very much indeed. And that is it from the Spin Room. Thanks for watching.